Hello everybody and welcome to episode 3 of the Screeps tutorial series. This episode we're going to build a spawn system so we can get those creeps that we wrote our managers for out into the game automatically as they're needed. So the general idea behind this is we're going to want to set the limits for the creeps. Check counts against the limits, spawn the next creep we can. So the way we're going to do this is by creating a new file. So let's do that right here. Let's call it spawn manager.js. And again, let's do module exports and export this as an object. And we want in here set limits. So function room. We want to set limits for the room. Let's be more specific, say set spawn limits. And this is actually going to be fairly easy. Just worker limits and harvester limits. And let's say we want 3 harvesters out and 5 workers for now. And then we can revisit these numbers later. And then let's have this set room.memory. So what we're doing right here is saying if this property doesn't exist in memory, set this property in memory. Set property. And then right here, set the elements. Memory. The reason we're doing this is so we're able to access these limits across all of our code. We just want to set it up in the memory for the room. Because if you noticed, like right here, we mess with the creep memory. These are just extra information that we have on the creep, on the room, on the structure, etc., etc. that we're able to use. So we're going to leverage that right here. Let's do const. Yeah, so we have that, then we can set room.memory.spawn limits equal spawn limits. That should be good for that one. So let's actually go in and make sure that this worked. Save the file, go over, and let's require it right here. Spawn manager equals require spawn manager. So now in here we do spawn manager dot what do we call that? Set spawn limits for our room. I'm in the sim right now. It's actually game.rooms. Actually, what we're gonna do here is make another for loop like we did for creeps, but for the room. Const key in game.rooms. Const room equal game.rooms key. Then we can call spawn manager dot set spawn limits room, and that should give us everything we need. So let's test that out. So we're in the room right here. Let's go to room memory. We have rooms, sim, spawn limits right there. We have worker 5, harvester 3, just like we expect to see. Now, another thing we need to do, this is just making sure this happens a little early. There's some cases where there's a game.room that appears only because you have a creep that's walking through that room, and that will cause issues down the line. So I'm actually going to give you guys a little tip here to beat that early. If not room.controller, or the two straight lines are or, by the way, or not room.controller.my. This is saying if the room has no controller, or the room is not my controller. We're going to continue. And continue, when you're going through a for loop, continue just says skip to the next item in the sequence. There's also break, which would break out of the for loop when it was encountered. But we're doing continue because we want to also check the next one. And I mentioned that this is or. Should have also explained last video, this is and. For this if statement to be true, with the and, both of these statements have to be considered true. So the create memory has to be working, and its carry has to be 0. And if we go back right here, the or operator, if there is no controller, or the controller is not mine. So this is saying if either of these are considered true, then we'll execute what is in the if statement body. And with this one, it's if both of these are considered true, we execute the if statement body. So yeah, we have the spawn limits working now. What we'll want to do is we want to override dot spawn next creep. I don't think we need to pass it anything. Equals function put that in the wrong place. So yeah, what this does, I'll write the comment as I add a function to a spawn to the spawn objects that will spawn the next creep if needed. Okay, so yeah, now what this prototype dot function will let us do, this prototype just means we're adding to an existing object right here, which is a structure spawn, which we can access. We can get a spawn object, and then now we can call whatever property we've just added, which in this case is a function, just like we do up here. Same idea here, just except instead of storing that in this variable, we are storing it in the spawn object itself. So we'll see that here in a little bit. Let's actually write this. What we want to do is get worker count, harvester count. So, and then we also want room equals this dot room. The this keyword refers to the spawn. This is basically just saying the object we are inside right now talking about. We have a reference to it with this. Then we store its room into the room variable it's just a little easier to work with, a little more clear. So that will allow us to get the worker and harvester count right here. So for the worker count, we'll want to add up, which you can do by, we want to get every worker in the game assigned to the room that this spawn is in. So we can access all our creeps through game.creeps, and this is lodash function. You could do the lodash.filter, and then this will accept two parameters: the array you want to iterate over, and then the condition you want to give it to tell it, okay, this is one of the arrays I want to keep. And then the results, every element in here that met this condition we're going to type will be stored into worker count. So we can use a little function shorthand. You could do function right there and do that, but there's a little bit of shorthand we can use which looks a lot nicer. You can define the variable you're going to call each iteration right there, and we'll name this one creep because we're talking about a single creep. And we want two things. We want creep.memory.homeroom is equal to, let's see, we want to return this. If you include these curly braces here, you have to return whatever's in the middle, but I'll actually fix it here in a second to not need the curly braces and show you what that looks like. It's even further shorthand. So if homeroom, so this tells us if the creep is in the same room as the spawn, and creep memory role is equal to worker. So this will give us every creep who their memory property homeroom is equal to the room the spawn is in, and their memory property role is equal to worker. So, in here let me show you taking away the return statement there. You can just remove these curly braces, and then it works just as expected. And then you could make this be one line function, but I prefer for them to be 3 lines. More clarity. So let's copy and paste this into harvester count right here. And then the only difference for harvester count is going to be this is not worker, it's harvester. So let's actually print those. Console log worker count console log harvester count, and we should see 2 zeros popping up. So let's go to the main We want to make another one of these for loops to call this function. Response key in game.spawns. So we have one for game.creeps, game.rooms, game.spawns. On spawn, you guys should be fairly versed in doing this by now. We don't need to add any of these extra checks. Let me so we can just do spawn dot, and we overrode that and called it spawn next creep. I believe, let's make sure. Yeah, we sure did. We don't pass it anything. And we save right here. Let's make sure that worked. No. Spawn next creep of undefined. Oh, because we did game.rooms.key. My bad. Hopefully some of you guys actually caught that. And beautiful. And then we just caught another mistake. You see this is empty. It should be printing the number 0. It's because we're trying to print out the entire array. We need to add .length right here to each of these variables, because worker count was just an array of the workers who fit this criteria. What we actually want is the number of workers who fit that criteria. So we save that, we go back here, and then now we can see the 0 is being printed. So we know this is working, we know this is working, and we know this is working. So we can save that and finish this up right here. So when do we want everything to spawn? We want a harvester to spawn first, because they're the ones that keep the spawn running, and then we want to spawn workers after that. So if harvest, let's get the, brings me right here, let's get the limits. Harvester limits equals room.memory.spawn limits harvester. And this is just accessing one of the properties from it. You can do that with the string there. Harvester limits, worker limits equal room.memory.spawn limits, and you actually also are able to here to do worker, but I prefer this since it's more clear what's going on, and then in the future you're able to actually put constants there if you prefer, which I do on my main code base. So if harvester count is less than harvester limits, we want to spawn a harvester. Check for harvester. Spawn a harvester. Else if check for worker. Sorry, took took me a second to check for worker to get that all. If worker count is less than worker limits. Okay, so now this will trigger first if we don't have enough harvesters. If we do have enough harvesters, this will trigger, and then we'll be able to spawn a worker. If neither of these are true, if we're at the limit for both of them, nothing will happen. So what we need to do is now just get the code in for this right here. So let's go down here, add a function to spawn a harvester, add a function to despawn objects to spawn a harvester worker. So yeah, we can go right here and do the same thing as above. Structure spawn dot prototype dot spawn harvester equal function. Then we can copy paste this. Well, we can wait and copy paste more when we make the next one. So what do we want to spawn on the harvester? Let's bring up the docs right here. Let's go to spawn creep. If you guys remember a line similar to this from last video, that's what we're going to be making right here. So we have 300 energy to work with in the room, and you can see the values of body parts. If I can find creep, here's its body parts possible and their cost and their effect. So we have 300 energy. We could do 1 work, 2 carry, 2 move. And that's what we're going to go with. That's actually what we went with on last video. Cost, energy, available, but what we want, energy available. So yeah, what we want here is all the energy we have to work with. And that's what we're going to get there. And actually scratch that, we want the energy capacity available, because we don't actually want to be using, if we only have, say, 50 energy in the spawn, we don't want it to try to spawn something with 50 energy. We want it to wait until it gets to 300. So then the name can just be like game.time, which just is the current tick we're on. So that's a good name for early game, at least, because before you're spawning multiple things in a single tick, this is guaranteed to be different. You'll have to figure something out for yourself once you get to multiple spawns, or we can visit that in an advanced video. Then we want to set an empty array for the body right here, and we want to set an object for the memory. Let's name this creep memory. I like to do things in variables, and then when I call the function, send it as many variables as possible so it's clear what's going on. And that's exactly what we're doing here. So what memory objects do we need? We use role. We use working. False. We do role. In this case, harvester. And we added homeroom. So it's this dot room dot name. Now we have all this information we can save within the creep. So now we want to build the creep body in a way that uses all of our energy, because eventually we're not just going to have 300 energy, we're going to have 600, 550, 1200, 1800 as we go on, and we want this to be able to scale. We don't want to have to rewrite this function for every amount of energy we could possibly have. So generate the creep body. Set all basic information about the creep spawn. So we have the energy capacity available, and let's say we want a work, a carry, and a move for just as many times as we can. So this costs 1, 150, 200. We'll be able to do that once, plus the carry and move again. So let's do number of parts equals, that costs 200 energy, so energy capacity available divided by 200, and we want to do math.floor, which rounds down and will truncate the decimal. Actually, we want to do math.ceiling, otherwise that would be 0. Math.ceil. So if this is 300 and this is 200, this is going to equal 1. Let's make sure that that's true. Number of parts. Spawn a harvester. We could call this dot spawn harvester. Let's go check in here. 2. Okay, so it is math.floor. Let's try that one. Yeah, okay. So that's what we need right there. Oh yeah, because 200 goes into 300 1.33 times. Okay, yeah. Or actually 1.5 times, sorry. So yeah, we want to round that down. And then we also want leftover energy equals energy capacity available mod 200, and the modulus operator right here will give you the remainder. So we have the leftover energy and the number of parts, const number of extra parts can be, so if we have, this will be a like carry move combination. We just want to make sure we're using all our energy. That costs 100 total. So let's do math.floor leftover energy divided by 100. So this right here will tell us how many 3-part sections we can make, and this right here will tell us how many of those 2-part sections we can make. And we can do a for loop right here for let's do let I equals 0. So I starts at 0, I is less than number of parts, and increment I after every iteration. So this will happen the number of times that number of parts is equal to. So if it's equal to 1, this for loop executes once. If it's equal to 10, this for loop executes 10 times. So what we want to do is take the body array, and it's an array so we can add elements to the end of it, which is what .push does. And we want to add work. Body.push carry body.push move. And then for the extra sections, we can do the same thing. I less than number of extra parts plus I body dot. The only difference here is we are not worrying about work right here. Body dot push move. Then all that's left to do is spawn the creep. So this referring to the spawn the creep using all of this information. This dot spawn creep, and it wants the body, which we just made, the name, which we defined up there, and options, which is an object denoted by these curly braces, and we can tell it in the memory place creep memory. So memory will now be equal to creep memory we defined right there. So now we can take this entire function, copy it, paste it right here for the worker. We can rename this to spawn worker, and then change this to worker, and everything else can stay the same here. We just need to be sure we add this dot spawn worker. So actually, if we go into the spawn right here, we can already see a harvester popped out. So let's give it a second and see if this guy is going to spawn another worker, and I will cut to that so this video isn't any longer than it has to be. Okay, so we can see the harvesters coming back with the last load. That will take this to 300 energy, and a worker should, or actually another harvester should spawn. And indeed it does. Now I will cut again to see if a worker spawns once there's 3 harvesters out. Stay tuned. I'm back here, and you can see actually directly in the memory here we have 5 creeps out, 1 worker, 2 worker, and 3 harvesters, just like we want. And this will go up to 5 workers, and then we'll be able to see, we'll actually be able to see it here pretty quick. And then since this worker couldn't find a spot on the source, it automatically targeted this source, which is what's nice about this. So yeah, this is upgrading up. As you can see, they're actually about to get the room to level 2, which will lead us straight into construction and repairing your structures, which will be the topic of video number 4. So guys, stay tuned for that, and in the meantime, enjoy your scripting.